Say you're walking by a pond or along a creek's edge and you notice something on the water's surface. Maybe it's a green covering, kind of like a pea soup or spilled green paint, or strange clumps floating along. What is it? Well, that's the topic of this edition of Between Two Great Lakes, a podcast by Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. Welcome back, I'm Adam Zaremski. With summer here in Western New York, the warmer weather means it's time when certain bodies of water will produce what are called harmful algal blooms. People in the industry might shorten that phrase to HABs, that'd be HABs. So if you see that acronym or you hear HABs, people are discussing harmful algal blooms. Just want you to know that off the bat. We'll be getting into what these algal blooms are, what to do if you find one, and where to send the information so it can be documented. To do that, we've got someone on staff to talk about HABs. But I do want to note, we are not experts in this field. Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper saw a need several years ago to learn more about HABs so we can educate the public. Through donor support and grants, we've trained staff about these blooms so they can test and report the information to other agencies like the Department of Environmental Conservation. So while not experts, we do want to inform people of the existence of harmful algal blooms and to do our part to document the sightings so we can better help our advocacy efforts in protecting our waterways. So I'm here with Wendy Patterson, Senior Program Manager for Community Engagement, to talk about harmful algal blooms. How are you, Wendy?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Happy to have you here. So Wendy, you have already found a few of these harmful algal blooms in Western New York, and you've recorded them, and we're going to talk about those later on. But to start, for the person who's listening and has heard of this, what is a harmful algal bloom?
Yeah, so if you break down the three words, harmful obviously means causing harm. So it can be harmful to the human health, to the economy, or to the ecosystem. Algae is any kind of organism that lives in an aquatic system and it uses the sun to produce its energy. Often they're plant-like organisms that live in water. So it's a good way to describe them. And then a bloom is referring to its population exploding. So its population is gone out of balance and is now booming, and there's a lot of algae in the water.
I never thought of that as the three different parts taken apart. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And how does one form?
To be clear, algae booms and busts in waterways, and algae is a very important part of our ecosystem. And so it's normal for algae to be in our water, and it's normal for there to be short blooms of algae. When we talk about harmful and how algae becomes harmful is generally when it's blooming and it stays blooming for a long time. And so it does that if there's an excess amount of nutrients and a lot of light. And nutrients is things like phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium. Those are all things that can support excessive and long-term growth of algae.
How does that get into the water, these excess nutrients? Is that...
Yeah, so it's definitely human-induced excessive nutrients. And so nutrients can come from fertilizer, so that's a big one. There's been lots of research about how farm runoff has impacted harmful algal blooms, and especially in the western basin of Lake Erie, which a lot of people have heard about. But it's also sewage and stormwater discharge as well that can have high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus in them. And so it is human-induced increased nutrients in that waterway. We are putting the nutrients in either our soils and it's running off, or we are putting it in our wastewater and it's draining into our creeks and streams and lakes.
And I guess the focus, though, of today's episode is the harmful side of it. I know you waterkeeper is looking to document both this summer, but I guess can any algal bloom turn into a harmful one?
So yes. So if there is a something that is blooming for a long period of time, so if there's algae that's blooming for a long period of time, it can cause harm in two different ways. It can produce toxins that could be harmful to humans and wildlife, or it could disrupt the oxygen balance in the water, which is harmful to wildlife. Oxygen is needed by fish to breathe, right? Basically, when an algae blooms and it's causing this big mat across the water, while it's blooming, it's blocking light to the water, and that would kill off any aquatic plants that might be growing in the sediment. And aquatic plants produce oxygen, so does algae. Algae produces oxygen. So while algae is blooming and alive, it's causing the plants to die off at the bottom, but it still produces oxygen. This is the tricky part. It's when it's dying that causes the oxygen disruption. So when algae dies, it sinks down to the bottom. The decomposers, often bacteria, which are oxygen consumers, start to degrade it, and they suck up all of the oxygen from the water. And in addition, the plants that were growing there have been killed. And so now there is no oxygen producers in the water. There's only oxygen consumers, and then the fish can't breathe.
Gotcha. So in one instance, there's like just touching the bloom itself can cause issues. But then the long-term thing, when it's gone, it's now impacting that waterway. So this is a huge impact.
Yeah.
And that's why we're trying to monitor them and see where they are and how to prevent them. If I'm correct in that?
Yeah.
Okay. So how harmful can a bloom be to people or animals?
I just have some examples. So these this is one example of a toxin. It's microcystins. It can cause abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, liver inflammation, hemorrhage, acute pneumonia, acute dermatitis, kidney damage, potential tumor growth promotion. So microcystins is one that was in the Toledo crisis when there was harmful algal blooms in the western basin of Lake Erie. So that it's a serious thing if they are producing toxins. The only type of algae that produces those toxins in the Great Lakes are cyanobacteria. So often instead of, another phrase that you can use instead of harmful algal blooms is HABs. So that's meaning that it's distinguishing that it's not just an algae that disrupts the oxygen balance, but it's an algae that could disrupt the oxygen balance and potentially produce toxins. So that's the human health risk there.
Is that simply just if someone's kayaking or just walking in the water, that can, just getting on the skin, that can start leading to these issues?
Definitely the biggest risk is in consuming the toxins, but touching some of the cyanohab toxins can cause tingling, burning, numbness, drowsiness, incoherent speech, salivation, respiratory paralysis leading to death. So yeah, coming in contact with any cyanobacteria is not recommended.
Mm-hmm. Is it something like if you quickly put your hand in and pull it out of the water, should you still be nervous?
So I am not an expert on the human health risks of cyanobacteria toxins, and that is definitely one area where Waterkeeper would love support to be able to test if there's toxins present. We currently do not have anything in-house to be able to test if those toxins are present in the water. And I am definitely not a human health expert, so I don't know the exact risk of touching it for a couple seconds. We just go with the recommendation, which is also made by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, of do not come in contact with cyanobacteria.
And you mentioned dogs. This is another, like it can harm them too.
Yes, dogs are at an increased risk of coming in, if they come in contact with the toxins that could potentially be produced by cyanobacteria, they could lead to death. And so it is a serious thing, and people should definitely check the water, see if there's any evidence of algal blooms before they let their dog go in that water.
So I guess for the person walking around by a pond or waterway, what are they looking for? What should they keep an eye out for? Is any green covering an algal bloom?
I do want to be clear, avoid contact with anything that's discolored water. If something looks unusual to you, do not come in contact with that waterway. So cyanobacteria is often described as looking like spilled green paint in the water. So that's a really good way to determine if there is a cyanobacteria bloom. Recently, we've been seeing something that looks very much like goose poop. And I will clarify that I am pretty much a layperson that's taken a couple of workshops on algae because we saw a need locally in somebody that is able to record cyanobacteria blooms. Waterkeeper invested time into making it so that I could identify them. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that I even knew this goose poop looking stuff was cyanobacteria. So we have recorded several this year because of the increased knowledge that I have, and then also because of Waterkeeper's campaign to get others aware of cyanobacteria. So it's so helpful when people report it, because then I can go out and check it out and we can get an accurate picture of what is the algal situation in Western New York. It's because of increased reporting and then additional knowledge that we're knowing that the cyanobacteria that looks like goose poop is out there. But yeah, so that is something to look out for. Spilled green paint is something to look out for. But even other algae, so if you see green mats on the water, it might not be cyanobacteria, but it's still a harmful algal bloom. And so it's still great to record it. And if you're ever guessing, like you don't know if it's cyanobacteria or not, send us a picture and we can go out and respond and determine if it is. So it's better to report it than to not.
And I do want to touch on that because, Waterkeeper's been doing this for several years, and, with the training to document it, and then you'll take that information and pass along to the proper agencies. What do you want people to do? So they're walking around, say a pond or waterway, which they see something. What's the process?
First of all, avoid contact, keep yourself and everyone else safe. And then second of all, take a picture. So take a picture and share it with us. You can share it with us via email or by calling. And you can share it with Rob Cody, who's in a recent podcast. So you can share it with him. His email is rcoady@bnwaterkeeper.org. You should record it, take a picture, and send it to us and get that information to us as soon as possible. And then we will follow up. And so we'll respond to it and take a look under the microscope, which is the only way we can actually definitively determine if it is a cyanobacteria or not.
So you were recently, it was Elka Creek you went to, and that's where you had been alerted. Someone contacted us. You went there. You were able to get a sample.
Yep.
And then brought it back here.
Yep.
And looked at it and were able to confirm that.
Yep. And Tonawanda Creek, both.
Okay.
So we had volunteers reach out to us about both creeks. We've sampled both. I do have all the recorded cyanobacteria blooms this year. In Ellicott Creek, we have noted a cyanobacteria bloom at Eastern Park at the paddle bikes launch, which is near where Ellicott flows into Tonawanda Creek, and also the Ellicott Creek Park kayak launch is where we have seen it in Ellicott Creek this year. And then on Tonawanda Creek, we've seen it at Veterans Canal Park and also at the Bark Park, which is confusingly named Ellicott Island Bark Park, but it's in Tonawanda Creek. And then also Ransom Creek, very close to where it flows into Tonawanda Creek. And then lastly, Rush Creek, where it is going through Woodlawn Beach.
So we've confirmed these places that have presence of it. What happens with that report then? That goes to which agency?
So it goes to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They do post it on their website. Then we also call the landowners and tell them what we have detected there as well. And we post it on social media as well. Lastly, we post it on our website at bnwaterkeeper.org/harmful-algal-bloom. And you can find all of the past harmful algal blooms there on our website. So everything that we've ever recorded in the past couple of years.
So that's a good resource for people who might have questions. They can go there, check it out.
Yep.
We will have a link in this episode in the description. How long does a bloom last? So like you've detected that in these spots, is the whole summer you're going to have that there, or is it able to dissipate within a week or two?
They're very dynamic and it's hard to predict. Harmful algal blooms, especially in freshwater systems, is under-researched. Being able to tell you exactly what is going to be the course of an algal bloom is nearly impossible at this point. We just know so little. But you can keep an eye on it and be hopeful that it will pass. But I would recommend being still cautious even after it disappears, because algae, if it is producing toxins, which to be clear, it does not always produce toxins. So if it is producing toxins, when the algae dies and the cells break down is when often the toxin levels spike. Let's say you saw that spilled paint look 2 days ago and now you're not seeing it, I would still avoid the water because you don't know if the toxins have been released in that water 2 days later.
And I guess, yeah, just to make clear, as you were noting, it's harmful, but it might not be producing toxins.
Correct.
So it may not necessarily hurt people. We still want them to be wary of it. But then, as you talked about too, the oxygen depletion in the waterway, that's an issue. So it's just kind of monitoring it. And that's something you're pushing this summer too for anyone. Like, we want to know about not just harmful ones, but any algal blooms. So that's something you're asking people. If they see something, just let us know.
Yes, exactly. So just letting us know. I mean, we learn things all the time about algae. And so even us, we have to go and do our due diligence of sampling and looking at it under the microscope to fully determine whether or not it is a cyanobacteria bloom. And so it's better to report it. And then in addition, any sign of algae bloom, so any sign of that excessive growth over a long period of time, is a sign that that waterway is stressed. And so having a record of what waterways are stressed in our system really helps us with our mission at Waterkeeper.
And so summertime is the main thing. Like spring, summer is when we're looking at that, because that's when they can form.
Yep, because of the longer days of daylight, sun is needed to produce their energy, right? If we have long sunny days, there's an increased risk of harmful algal blooms. And in addition, temperature. So nutrients is number one, but on a global scale, climate change has a huge impact on the risk of harmful algal blooms, and that's because water temperatures are warmer. So we are seeing in the Great Lakes that water temperatures are going up. So the average water temperature is going up each year. And as that water temperature goes up, it increases the risk that a harmful algal bloom could form.
Wendy, is there anything else you want people to know? Anything they should do or let us know about?
Yeah, one main thing that Waterkeeper does is we restore shorelines. So through our Living Shoreline project, we're looking at hardened, degraded shorelines that do not absorb stormwater and prevent that runoff of nutrients. They do not provide shade to reduce the temperature of the water. So one thing you can do is, if you own property on waterway, consider how you could transform that shoreline to be a shaded area that absorbs water. Or you could talk to people that you do know or representatives to change that shoreline. And then lastly, you can talk to your municipalities about what kind of sewer system they might have and seeing if there's ways to upgrade that sewer system.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy. It was great to have you. And if people have questions, they can reach out to you, Waterkeeper. We'll put in contacts in the description for this episode, and kind of keep an eye out there and let us know if you see something.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Wendy. So I want to remind people that while we obtain grant funding for projects, donations from people are another huge resource to allow us to keep going forward with our mission of protecting and restoring shorelines and waterways, while hopefully expanding what we do. Anything you can give to Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper is huge and helps us out. So go to our website, bnwaterkeeper.org/donate to make a contribution. And again, thanks to local Buffalo band Snowbelt for the music today. They have a new album out, Norris Avenue. You can find that on all the streaming services. We'll have more editions of the show on the way. Subscribe to Between Two Great Lakes to keep up to date with what we're up to. That's all for today. Be well and do good.